Welcome back, everyone. This is Michael Sigman in the Philosophy Department at East Los Angeles College. And today we're going to talk about the notion of a social contract as it's used in political philosophy. And we're also going to introduce a social contractarian, that is somebody who utilizes that approach to political philosophy, a guy named John Rawls. And there you see a caricature of John Rawls that was published in the New York Times Review of Books. I distinctly remember when it came out in association with his second book. Anyways, that his seminal work is called A Theory of Justice. Now, in this particular case, I'm splitting up the two presentations. So right now, this short video is simply going to cover the notion of a social contract. I will then follow up with a second video on John Rawls in particular. So let's tackle the social contract first. Okay, getting down to brass tacks, what is social contract theory? It's the idea, and DF there just means defined as, it's the idea that you as an individual and those others who are in your society, that we get together and we agree to forego, to give up some of our rights, and to join into an association with other individuals for the purpose of mutual advantage. So we are giving up some of our freedoms, and in doing so, we gain benefit for not just for ourselves, but for everyone. As is the case with a legal contract, and that's really sort of what it's modeled on, as is the case with a legal contract, a social contract has give and take. That is, it provides advantages, but it also gives rise to duties, to obligations. And when we're talking about a social contract with a state, then part of that contract, of course, involves abiding by the laws of the state. Some political theorists actually prefer to call this a social covenant rather than a social contract. And Thomas Hobbes would fit into to that category. There's really a sort of a minor difference, but it's meaningful in its own way. A covenant is just like a contract, but in a covenant, one of the parties to the agreement performs their obligation in full first and takes it on good faith that the other party will then subsequently follow through with their end of the agreement. So one notion of a covenant would be something like, there's in organized religion, we'll sometimes talk about, in particular in Christianity, talk about a covenant with God. That is, we take it on faith that if we live our lives following these rules from God, then at the time that we die, God will later fulfill God's side of the bargain. That is, give us eternal bliss or whatever it might be. Okay. Why do we need a social contract? Well, imagine a world where there's no social contract, or where there is no state whatsoever. So here you just have lone individuals who are out operating on their own, and there's no government, there's no laws, there's no rules. In political philosophy, that hypothetical scenario is called the state of nature. We call it the state of nature. So, according to social contract theory, what is the source of governmental authority? And this is really a very important question for political philosophy in particular. Is it just that the government has more guns than us? Is it just that the government has inherited certain rights over us? Well, social contract theory rejects those ideas. and says the only reason that this contract works is because we, the individual citizens, that is, you and me, we voluntarily agree to enter into the contract with the state that we live in. And by state, I don't mean the state of California. I, I would here mean, broader, the United States of America, that is our government. Why would we voluntarily agree to give up some of our authority and turn it over to the government? Well, there are benefits to be had by doing so. And the cost-benefit ratio is very, very much skewed on the side of there being more benefit than there being costs. So we gain things like security. We gain things like peace. We gain things like functioning transportation routes. We gain things like the time to think, or as Hobbes actually put it, the time for a commodious lifestyle. It's actually a great word and has nothing to do with commode, by the way. All right. Well, you might be saying, I understand your theory, but I never signed a contract with my state. I never signed on with the United States and said, yes, I agree to abide by your rules in exchange for some benefits that you're going to give me. So if I didn't sign that contract, then does the contract apply to me? The answer that social contract theorists will give is yes, it does apply to you, because if you knowingly receive benefits that are provided by the state, then your acceptance of those benefits comes with obligation. So nothing is free. That is, you are, through your actions, accepting the conditions of the contract. And that idea is known in political philosophy, and it's a very important idea. It's known as tacit consent. Tacit means unspoken or implied. So you don't have to openly consent to a social contract to have it actually enforceable on you. If you accept those benefits that the state provides, then you, in return, you owe something to the state, whether you have formally agreed to it or not. There have been a lot of different social contractarians over the years, and oftentimes their views differ really widely. And just a sort of taste of that diversity, some of the more famous social contract theorists from the so-called Age of Enlightenment and the French Renaissance, the rebirth of intellect. One main social contractarian is someone I've mentioned already a couple times here, that is Thomas Hobbes. And Hobbes, in describing the state of nature, describes it as nightmarish. It's an absolute nightmare. Hobbes argued that the state of nature, it would be a war of everyone against everyone, and that your life under those conditions would be, great quote from Hobbes, it would be solitary, poor, nasty, brutish. That is, you'd be behaving like a brute, an animal, and short. It would be short-lived. So when the rules go away, Hobbes says people behave badly. So he was very pessimistic about human nature, and he saw the social contract as really sort of a saving grace for humanity, that now we can combine together and provide ourselves some protection, some self-preservation by giving up certain rights or certain freedoms. In fact, Hobbes went so far as to say that a social contract with an organized state that can provide us with protection, that it's so important to keep us out of that horrible state of nature, that we should be willing to negotiate almost every one of our freedoms. In fact, there's only one one right that we would never negotiate away. Only one, and that's the right to life. Again, not the abortion jargon. The right to life meaning you would never say, I agree, the state can take my life whenever they want to. No rational being would agree to that. In contrast to Hobbes and his pessimism about human nature and his painting the social contract as this, this wonderful lifeline, there's someone named Jean-Jacques Rousseau who approached the topic very, very differently. Rousseau, he believed that people in the state of nature are in a state of bliss almost. That is, the individual in the state of nature is free, is happy, and is indeed noble. And that's where it's from Rousseau that the popularized expression, the noble savage, comes from. So these guys are sort of diametrically opposite. Hobbes is very pessimistic about human nature. Rousseau is very optimistic about human nature. Hobbes sees the social contract as a great saving grace. Rousseau, on the other hand, sees the social contract as a necessary evil because he believes that we have this sort of self-destructive impulse. We're social creatures. And even though we're free, happy, and noble, we are drawn to others. And when we get together in large groups, we need some rules. And so there is the price that we pay for being social creatures is that we have to form a contract with the group and give up some of our rights to the state. In Rousseau's terminology, we have to make our individual will match up to the general will of the group. That's an interesting idea. Another famous social contractarian is a guy named John Locke. That's right, John Locke that we saw in the very first unit. And Locke, he claimed that a rational individual would only agree to a social contract that includes the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of property. I know you were going to say happiness. What happened, and this is not a coincidence, the authors of the Declaration of Independence for the United States, they basically plagiarized Hobbes. They plagiarized Locke, John Locke, from Locke's second treatise on government. In essence, they changed one word. They changed pursuit of property to pursuit of happiness. And they called these rights that Locke said are necessary for anyone to join into a contract. The authors of the Declaration of Independence for the United States, they called these famously inalienable rights. That is, a right that you cannot take away from the citizen without violating the agreement. So it's very much like a social contract then. We will next time pick up here with Rawls and his famous original position. The original position is, for Rawls, the vantage point of justice. It's a hypothetical thought experiment, but if we are able to put ourselves in that mindset, from there we can, the lights will come on, and we will see what justice really entails, what it really looks like. So we'll get to Rawls in the next video.